Hey, this is Chaotic here with another CZN video. Today we're going to be talking about Tenebria now that she's been out for almost a week. The big question is, do you actually need her? Or more importantly, do you want her? Coming from an Epic 7 background, she was one of my favorite characters in the game, and ironically, this version of Tenebria feels much more like Tamarin wearing a Tenebria skin than the Tenebria we knew from Epic 7. And between the idol theme, which I wasn't particularly excited about, and one of the most complex kits, I was pretty torn on whether I want to pull for her or not. Since her release, though, we've seen plenty of showcase videos demonstrating her scaling and absurd damage potential, so I decided to pull her and see what she can really do. And after spending some time playing, I would position her as the highest skill ceiling DPS released so far, but also one of the most team-dependent characters in CZN. So let's start by taking a look at her kit, which revolves entirely around rhythm cards. At the start of the battle, her passive Music Start exhausts all basic guitar attack cards for your entire team and replaces them with rhythm cards. This effectively gives every character 40 additional save data points to work with, allowing for either 2 extra Divine Epiphanies or an additional card copy depending on your build. And unlike traditional DPS characters that simply play attack cards, Tenebria functions as a combo engine, and her gameplay revolves around chaining different rhythm cards together and building towards massive end-of-turn damage. And Arpeggio is by far her strongest rhythm card and serves as the core of most of her builds, but Fortissimo and Fermata both have their uses. Fortissimo links together her base rhythm card and adds an additional hit whenever 3 or more cards are linked. Since rhythm cards are naturally activate each other, Quietus is not necessary. Then Fermata costs 1 AP to play, but allows you to choose which rhythm card you want each turn, while also drawing 2 additional cards. And this version has synergy with the Faceless Woman upgrade that draws a card whenever a link card is activated. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus primarily on Arpeggio, which consists of a sequence of 6 rhythm cards that scale based on the total number of rhythm cards available. For example, Arpeggio 5 at the bottom deals 113% damage for each rhythm card. With 6 rhythm cards available, that becomes a total of 5 times 113, which is 678% total damage from a single activation. Then this Epiphany also has incredible synergy with multiplicative scaling buffs. Most regular attack cards, they benefit from these buffs once, but because of Arpeggio's mechanics, they allow scaling to apply to each individual instance. For example, using Arpeggio 5 again, if Ray applies Strike of Darkness for 100% basic attack damage, the calculation becomes 113 plus that 100, then take that total and multiply by 6 arpeggios. And this results in over 1200% scaling just on one 100% basic attack damage scaling. And then once you factor in multiple versions of Strike of Darkness, then also gear bonuses and engravings, personas, and other multipliers, it becomes very easy to see why her damage ceiling is so incredibly high. Then moving on to her other cards, she has several options that, well, let's go back to here. She has several options that support different builds. Currently, she has 2 primary DPS builds, the Spotlight build and the Encore build. Let's start with the Spotlight build. So Epiphanies 3 and 4 are generally the strongest versions and the best copy targets for a Spotlight focused build. Epiphany 3 is fairly AP hungry, costing 1 AP even after taking the Divine Epiphany cost reduction. It deals damage, allowing you to allowing you to move 2 rhythm cards and then activate them. And then at the end of an arpeggio chain, you can play multiple copies of Spotlight to repeatedly activate arpeggios 4 and 5, resulting in massive end of turn damage. This version can also take the vulnerable Divine Epiphany for even more damage if you can support the amount of AP that it requires. Then Epiphany 4 is theoretically capable of even higher damage and allows you to move 3 rhythm cards to the top of your draw pile and then draw 1 card. And the order you select the arpeggios determines the order that they're placed into your deck. For example, selecting arpeggios arpeggios 4, 5, and then 1. We'll place them in that order. So you'll always draw this card first, and playing this 1 cost arpeggio will draw arpeggios 4 and 5. So the cost of the Spotlight itself is 0, but it will cost 1 AP for the first arpeggio sequence. So this one is a little bit cheaper in terms of AP management. You'll be able to play 3 arpeggios for the cost of 1 AP, and on top of that, Spotlight can Divine Epiphany a +1 AP, making it AP neutral, or you could Divine Epiphany and draw 1 for more draw. Then the other major damage archetype revolves around Encore, specifically Epiphany 1. As long as the last card played was a rhythm card, Encore will activate it 2 additional times, and we can further increase the damage by taking the vulnerable Divine Epiphany. The sequence for this is fairly simple. You complete your arpeggio chains ending with arpeggio 5, then play Encore. Encore deals its damage, applies 2 stacks of vulnerable, and because arpeggio 5 was the last rhythm card played, it immediately actives arpeggio 5 2 more times. Then after that, you can play another Encore because the last activated card remains arpeggio 5, and you can continue this chain up to 4 times if you're running 4 copies of Encore version 1. Another valuable copy target is Encore Epiphany 3, which reduces the cost of the next 3 rhythm cards while adding an additional hit. Having at least 1 copy of this version is very useful, not only for the AP reducing ability of this card, it helps with the arpeggio sequencing after you play 0. 1 will have a cost, and sometimes 2 and 3 may have a cost as well, and this will lower the cost, saving you AP in the long run. And for Encore builds, this can also combo nicely with Spotlight Epiphany 4 that moves 3 cards to the top of your deck towards the end of the turn. Then both Spotlight and Encore builds are capable of producing absurd damage numbers, but personally I think Encore is a stronger overall option because it costs 1 AP while also being able to apply 2 stacks and vulnerable. Then moving on to Call and Response. Its primary purpose is to function as a 7th rhythm card. We talked about earlier, her sequence scales off the number of rhythm cards. So the more rhythm cards, the more damage potential. So versions 1 and 5 are the most relevant versions since both are treated as rhythm cards if they're in your hand. Epiphany 1 draws 2 rhythm cards as attunement, while Epiphany 5 focuses more on damage. Personally, I prefer 1 because the additional draw provides more consistency, and being able to fish arpeggios out of your deck without relying on external draws such as repose is essential for optimal sequencing. Getting these out of your deck will help your turn progression. If you're able to pull arpeggio 0, 1 early, then you can pull the remaining arpeggios, effectively thinning and make your combos more reliable. And then finally, we have Photo Time, which I don't think is very good. It's a very mediocre card. She has very high scaling on Arpeggio, but this card does not benefit from the same scaling mechanic. And since it also costs 1 AP to play, and Tenebria is already extremely AP hungry, this card can often be cut because of not being too useful. Then moving on to partners, Area is her designated partner, and the synergy between Area and Tenebria is incredibly insane. So just based off of the amount of stats she gets, I do have this at max ego manifestation, but not only is she getting 24% attack, then basic attack damage stacks up to 48%, and then 40% critical damage at max stack as well. And then the ego will increase the damage of her basic attack by 20% while also reducing the cost of basic attacks by 1 for 1 turn, as long as Tenebria uses her ego skills as well. Honestly, I think this is a no-brainer. She is easily Tenebria's best partner, and if you're planning on investing in Tenebria, I would strongly consider Arya as a must-have support. Then let's take a look at a sample deck. We're able to keep the 2 attack basics in just because the music start will exhaust those 2. And this is the Encore version of the build, splitting copies between the 2 Encores, the attack version as well as the skill version. And I have the vulnerable stacks on the attack version and draw 1 on the skill version. Although you could also go with a reduced cost of 0. If this becomes too AP intensive, I may eventually change the Divine Epiphany from draw to reduced cost. And then for this setup, I'm also running a persona of Obsidian with double 30% attack rolls to further increase her damage output. And this persona cut has excellent synergy with Prelude to Hero Memory Fragment set, which grants 15% critical chance if Tenebria discards one of her attack cards. And because of this interaction, discarding a middle arpeggio such as 2 or 3 can generate a surprising amount of value and significantly increase your overall damage throughout the turn. Then as far as for gear, I think this setup is close to ideal for most content, although the Cthulhu gun is also a very strong alternative. The nice thing is that many of these pieces can be farmed from Swamp of Judgment Chaos, which is especially valuable considering how difficult it can be to find strong damage-oriented chess piece. So this one is the best in slot, 6% critical chance. Now, Tenebria, she doesn't gain much value from flat damage effects compared to other DPS characters because she already has access to so many sources of multiplicative scaling. And because of that, the critical damage from Dagger combined with the attack from Verdant Shackles provides, I think, one of the highest damage ceilings available. And then for engravings, I would recommend the 25% haste cards, the 15% critical damage. I didn't roll the 30% attack when 7 or more cards are in graveyard, but that one is another one I would look for. Then when it comes to memory fragments, she has a lot of viable options. In most cases, I would recommend just using the stronger pieces that you have currently available. 222 focus on attack, critical damage, and basic attack damage is probably the ideal configuration for most characters or players, but unfortunately I don't have the gear necessary to run that setup myself, so I went ahead and used Prelude, and you can tell these pieces are not ideal. I did farm Prelude quite a bit for Heidi Marie, so this is probably the set that I have the most pieces for in terms of Tenebria. Even the Passion set can perform surprisingly well since Tenebria automatically plays an upgrade card at the start of battle. Then as far as substats, your priority should be crit chance first, followed by crit damage, then attack. And then for neck, go with crit chance. For the ring, either passion damage or attack, whichever one has better substats. And then of course, here we want attack percent. And now let's move on to Eagle Manifestation. Personally, I think she functions just fine at E0. It doesn't really need additional manifestations to perform at a high level. E1 here increases damage flow time, but since we're cutting that card in most optimal builds, the value here is fairly limited, so this ego is pretty worthless. Then Ego 2 creates a special photo card that grants 2 ego, and then whenever she uses her ego skill, it deals additional damage based on the skill's cost. While this isn't a necessary upgrade, it does provide some quality of life improvements and help smooth out damage during Chaos and Sorties run, especially if you have E6, which we'll get to in just a little bit. But if you don't have E6, E0 is probably where I would stop. Then E3, most upgrades in CZN are fairly underwhelming, but Tenebria's is actually one of the better ones. It provides a permanent increase to rhythm cards that stack throughout the battle, and at maximum stacks, the bonus increases from 7 to 11%, and it stacks up to 7 times. So you're really increasing the damage from 49 to 77%, which allows her to continue ramping up her damage throughout longer battles. Then E4 provides yet another damage increase, granting up to 30% damage at full stacks. E5 is the 6% bonus, same for every combatant. Then E6 is where her true power really starts to show. The combination of E2 and E6 creates a massive quality of life upgrade. E2 gives 2 ego, and then E6 reduces the cost of her own ego from 7 to 4. And effectively, this reduces the cost of her own ego from 7 to a net cost of only 2. And this allows her to use her ego skill more frequently in Chaos and Sortie. And then we saw earlier that E2 also deals 200% damage to random enemies for each of its original cost. So if you're playing a 4-cost ego, then you're getting 4 instances of 200% damage, which can help out. Since you're only paying 2 ego for this, you're paying 2 ego for 800% damage spread out among random enemies. And then on top of that, All Eyes on You provides an additional 40% rhythm card damage, pushing her scaling even further. That being said, I believe E0 is all most players will ever need. Her damage is already ridiculous. E3 through E6 certainly unlock more damage, but at the current state of the game, we don't really need that amount of damage. There's no content that demands that level of investment. Her damage ceiling already is absurd, and my opinion, just based off of running her in what's that called? Running her in Spiral Tower Screams stage 135, I was getting over 200,000 damage, not even using her ego skill or her partner skill. And that's not even including finishing out her entire turn. So the boss was dead before I could even use my Encores. So her damage is just ridiculous. I think she easily outrivals Heidi Marie's under the right conditions. If you have Ray with the multiple copies of Strike of Darkness, and then she also has a Strike of Darkness that costs 0, that also plays all basic cards, then Tenebria can just unload all of her arpeggios if you have them in your hand. But the biggest caveat is that Tenebria, she requires a lot of support to reach that ceiling. Many of her rhythm cards, along with Spotlight and Encore, they're extremely AP hungry, and without cost reduction, AP generation, and you'll definitely need some additional card draw. Your turns can easily brick and your combo sequence can fall apart. And because of this, I would highly recommend pairing her with Ray, because she provides a lot of damage, ideally running multiple versions of Strike at Darkness to maximize her scaling. And then for the third slot, you'll for sure want any strong AP and draw engine that helps keep her combo flowing. So Narja is a consideration. I think Veronica is probably the best in slot if you have her, just because she is consistent with draw and AP if you get the Divine plus AP on Repose. And with the 40 extra points, you don't have to take out the basic. You can also get 4 copies of Repose with Divine. You can even Divine the Sir Kowalski with the 0 cost. So I think overall, I would consider Tenebria probably the most team-dependent DPS character that we have so far. You can't really just add her to an existing team. You basically have to build the entire team around Tenebria for her to be able to function. But that being said, I think she is incredibly strong, with potential to be strong throughout the next 6 to 12 months. So you won't really waste resources pulling for her. She's already, I think, stronger than Heidi Marie in terms of overall damage. So she's not going to be outclassed relatively soon. So where does that leave her overall? I don't think she is a must-pull character. If you already have Heidi Marie, she is definitely an option. She's another passion DPS with a more combo-oriented playstyle that requires more setup and planning. If you like her design with the idol theme and music theme, then definitely pull for her. She's definitely fun, and her potential damage is borderline game breaking right now. And for players who enjoy optimizing decks, she'll be definitely a lot of fun. Although you'll have to go back and reform a lot of those decks because you're not really optimizing your decks if you don't include those basics in. While she isn't a limited character, my recommendation is to stop at E0. She eventually will be added to the standard character pool after her banner ends, and then you'll have opportunities to pick up additional copies naturally over time. And overall, she's an incredibly powerful character with one of the highest damage ceilings, but she needs the correct setup. But let me know what you think about Tenebria in the comments below. Are you pulling for her, skipping her, already pushing her damage to ridiculous levels? We already know that the next character coming out is Faye. There are already videos on her kit, so you can kind of already make a decision whether you want to invest in Tenebria or Faye, or maybe even save your crystals for the next limited characters. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.